when we were kids, me, my brother, and my mom, well, my brother and I were kids. We were going to school. We didn't have a car at that time, and so we were in a auto rickshaw, like one of those tuk-tuk things, a
Mhm.
three-wheeler, and it was going at a higher speed, and suddenly it flipped on its side. So we were all three, all four of us, my mom, my brother, me, and the driver. We flipped on our side, and we kind of had an accident there. So anyway, it wasn't too bad or anything like that, but it was obviously kind of we were all shocked by that. But then we made it to school. We were on our way to school. We made it to school, and obviously we were late to school. And because I was late, I remember that I was punished and made to stand outside to miss the first period because I was late.
Cambrian explosion.
Hello, everybody. This is part two of our discussion on mental health around the world. And if you want to check out our part one, make sure to go to our previous podcast and see. We are joined here today with our special guest who studied medicine in Pakistan, and he's going to be giving his perspective along with Nabil and Yawer, our podcast hosts.
You've lived in Pakistan, you've lived over here in Canada, and there's definitely differences in approaches to mental health in both countries. Um, can you both tell me your lived experience as well as then dive a little bit about it from a more system kind of perspective?
And if we have witch doctors in Canada, that would be nice to know.
We could we could start a college of witch doctors and start handing out licenses. Um, yeah, so mental health in Pakistan. When I have lived for 26 years in Pakistan. And the trauma happened in Pakistan that from like, obviously I was there. So what I will say is that throughout my life growing up, like nobody in my home knew anything about mental health. There was like as a system, I feel like there are challenges in Pakistan to mental health, and I think some of the biggest ones are unfortunately our beliefs and our culture. And the stigma over there is on a whole other level. But over there there's like a big distinction sort of made between mentally ill people and non-mentally ill people, where they don't actually seem to realize that like these problems are happening to everyday people, right? These are not like special people. They're not all pagal khana people, right? Like everybody makes it sound like, no, seriously, because over there, like you tell somebody you have mental illness and they're already like they're thinking a million things that are irrelevant and could be actually harmful for you. And the only problem is a lack of knowledge and information. I remember when I was in med school, like we used to do like regular drug drives and stuff like that. We used to do a lot of community work, like a lot of volunteer work where we help people who had been affected by the floods and who needed malaria treatment and who have like outbreaks of various diseases in their communities and things like that, where I remember that I had to deliver like what's it called, my pitch in Pashto and in Urdu and in English, right? So it's like a lot of available infrastructure being directed towards like a lot of those illnesses, but we don't see the same thing with mental health. As I mentioned earlier, there's a severe shortage of psychiatrists. Therapy is not actually a protected profession in Pakistan. So everybody and their grandma is like healing trauma for someone now. Um,
So do you find that when people come to Canada, that they bring those, misconceptions and stuff here, and how is Canada's infrastructure helping them, if at
so so Canada helps a lot. At least like I know I hear a lot of Canadians. My girlfriend is Canadian. She's always complaining about the health system here. But I'm always like from back home, it's like a big step up. Um, but coming over here from Pakistan is, like a lot of other stuff gets mixed into this huge witch doctor's pot is the fear of being in a new place, right? Like we're all immigrants, we've all come here, we've all looked around us and been like, we're in a new place, right? That's not the kind of place where you sit down to take your armor off. Nobody's comfortable taking their armor off in a new place, right? It's very hard for us to reach out for help and support over here. There's I'm obviously I'm not saying that like there's racism within the health system, which I'm certain there is, but why wouldn't there be? But the important thing is like coming here as a Pakistani, opening your heart up to a therapist who is not Pakistani and may not actually understand where you're coming from and the kind of like more in the moment kind of life that we're living in Pakistan where like the laws are different, the way people react to things are different.
There's a thing that we studied back home when I did my it was a course on development in Pakistan, and one of the things that we studied was that there's a huge drive for purity in Pakistan, cultural drive for purity. A Sayyid is given more importance. A Sayyid is a
Yeah,
bastardization so that you sound like a Sayyid, right? And part of that purity drive ends up being that mental health is seen as a non-pure thing, like, oh, he has a defect, and which is not the case because, as you mentioned, everybody has a defect. No, there's no such thing as normal,
yeah,
um, but that's given a lot of importance there, and I think that's an interesting thing to see whether how those values carry over to Canada and how they are um, implemented or how they're lived through by the younger population of immigrants over here in Mississauga or in Toronto in the practices that we see.
yeah. I think one of the most important things to mention in that regard would be that, well, for one, you're 100% correct that there is this purity culture in Pakistan. Purity culture is a common issue for a lot of religious communities. I've read some books about like sexual health and stuff like that, where it's not like a problem that's only endemic to Pakistan. There's like we're finding out that a lot of the US is actually probably more religious than Pakistan.
Yeah,
But like they're having the same kind of problems over there and people are writing all these books about it in the US and there's a lot of black people who are taking the main stage. There's a lot of like cultural shifts taking place. There's a lot of new perspective being added over here. And then because it's a multicultural place, I think that the amount we learn from each other is like booming. It's exponential over here, where the number of intersecting like cultures and communities, we are actually able to learn so many things from each other if we were to keep an open mind.
yeah.
Um,
So
Exposure.
sorry, I was just going to say that I think when people come from third world countries like Pakistan, they fear that they're going to lose their culture here. So they end up getting more engrossed in maintaining their culture. So I think that's when they come here, they become more religious and and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think, understanding that there are differences between religion and culture
mhm.
and really making sure that you stick to those and do what's best for your youth and your children and your families is what's something I learned from Canada way more than I did when I was in Pakistan.
Yeah, I've been on some internet forums and they are full of these posts about these younger kids, young adults or teenagers, and they talk about how their parents are controlling their lives and they want, they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and they're not accepted and or the parents are like abusive somehow, like they try to, guilt trip them and stuff like that. So they all of these, I see that they have a lot of problems in the younger generations as well, because of the clash of cultures, I guess, and the clash of generations.
Tell me about your personal experience. So when you land in Canada, how much do you know about the healthcare system over here? And then how did you go about finding out how to find the right resources to help yourself within the Canadian system? And how much help did you get in that?
So I'm lucky to have met the people that I met over here because I did not actually know how sick I was. And like there were times where I was a danger to myself, right? Um, so I consider myself very lucky to have found the therapist that I did, but I literally Googled him. Like like I mentioned earlier, was that my sister was the first one who like managed to point out to me because the problem with DID is you're not very aware of what's happening to you, right?
Hmm.
So she was the one who pointed it out to me first. But at that point, like I was so desperate to, you know, have any kind of information whatsoever about what was happening with me that I literally Googled my therapist and I found a guy who specialized in DBT. um, so I started seeing him.
So, just
He
a question: what's DBT?
It's dialectical behavioral therapy. It's
Ah, okay.
yeah. So it's a type of therapy. Um, so I worked with him for a year. He was a white guy. He was Argentinian and Christian. So it was I remember a lot of our initial time together was just spent with me trying to like make justifications for things and like I did not really realize how much like I was affected by like getting therapy from a white person who may not understand where I'm coming from. This, so I sort of had to teach him everything. But he was like what I loved about him was that he was open to learning from me as much as he wanted to teach me, right? And we were able to work together very well because of that, because he was willing to understand where I was coming from. I have personally had a very good experience in that regard. I think that the doctors and therapists that I've met since then, in fact, the only doctor that I met who was a psychiatrist who I met who was a little putting out was a Pakistani. And his uh, he's a very senior psychiatrist. I'm sure he's very good at what he does. Or maybe he was just not like maybe he'd had a bad day that day or something. But the way in which you're dealing with somebody has to be appropriate. Kind of like, it no one's saying you got to be extra empathetic. Nobody's saying you have to be like like you don't have to coddle the patient. He's probably been through more than you have, right? Um, but what 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 like stood out to me was that he's the one who made all these assumptions. Like he would tell me like, you should think about your family, think about God, and like uh he was bringing all of these non-scientific things into it. I'm not a very religious person, but I'm not irreligious either. I'm not like I'm a deeply spiritual human being. But I did not like that because I had gone there for science, right? I had not gone
Yeah.
there for anything else. The uh the Canadian therapists and psychiatrists that I met, right? Like my entire team are white people. They're very skilled at what they do because they've been in the business over here for a considerably long time. Canada is probably one of the statistics I had like read up for you guys was that Canada is the West's most PTSD ridden country.
Very interesting.
Yes.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So we have like up to 9% of the population has PTSD here. That's 1 in 10 people. And that's a
Wow.
lot for a Western country. In Pakistan, the research that I read puts us as far up as 25 to 50% of people have PTSD symptoms. So, in a way, sort of when we're talking about Pakistanis, we're sitting with our friends, we're always like talking about, oh, that time the police stopped you in Pakistan and like messed with you, and that time you got like robbed on the street, and you got mugged or something, or like all of this stuff. A lot of this stuff is not it's not relatable to people over here, is because they don't like over here that would be a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Back home it's a Sunday,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
It's not,
It's
Yeah, it's
it's
a
a
part of your
coursework.
daily life. You
Yeah.
it's a
expect it.
part, yeah, and you kind of like live with the burden of that fear everywhere you go. And it's not just that. It's not like you're only the bad. It's not even only the bad people that are trying to get you over there. Like there's the politicians and the gangsters and the this and the that. Is just seriously number of problems that you can run into on the street. You step on someone's foot in Karachi, like you could end up in a body bag, right?
Yeah.
Trying to translate that experience of how I managed to joke around and laugh, and like that is difficult for people to understand, is that how have you adapted
Yeah.
so completely to the hostile environment, right?
Yeah.
Is something that I felt is was difficult for my healthcare team over here to get a grasp of, and had
This reminds
to.
me of a funny, well, in retrospect, it's funny, but it wasn't funny at the time. So when we were kids, me, my brother, and my mom, well, my brother and I were kids. We were going to school. We didn't have a car at that time, and so we were in a auto rickshaw, like one of those tuk-tuk things, a three-wheeler. And it was going at a higher speed, and suddenly it flipped on its side. So we were all three, four of us, my mom, my brother, me, and the driver. We flipped on our side, and we kind of had an accident there. So anyway, it wasn't too bad or anything like that, but it was obviously kind of we were all shocked by that. But then we made it to school. We were on our way to school. We made it to school, and obviously we were late to school. And because I was late, I remember that I was punished and made to stand outside to miss the first period because I was late.
That's terrible.
Wait, so your mom couldn't get away with writing your note that day?
She was a bit busy, like she was recovering
Oh,
and she was looking
yeah.
Yeah,
after
She
my
probably had
brother and all that stuff. Yeah,
her own
yeah,
injuries.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Give
It's
you a good perspective on priorities and
yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I so relate with that message of like ev- I have seen everything from I've lived in Islamabad, so I've seen everything from the Lal Masjid incident where half of the city was occupied by militants to bombings, craters of bombings to earthquake destroying buildings and having to step in there. Uh, so I so relate with
Yeah,
that. And over here, 10 years over here, maybe a bridge under a bridge, there was a little flood or something
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that didn't harm anyone. So it's very different in terms of risks that you live through on a daily
Yeah,
basis.
and then everyone talks about it for the longest news cycle, and you're wondering why.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
It's I think like an important point is that there's a cumulative burden of trauma. Like what one would say, like this thing happened to me versus my environment is like this, right?
hmm,
Is a different kind of, again, like I personally think that these things contribute to culture, right? The culture of a place and the culture of a people is how they're living. And this cumulative burden of trauma is something that is so massive back home that we kind of decompress when we come here. I don't know if you guys had that sort of experience. When I came here at first, I was like almost weak with relief, because it's like you're saying, like my life in Pakistan was not easy. I have TID, but um but like I've lost relatives to terrorist attacks, like the one in Peshawar and the mosque. I don't know if you guys remember. So like it's like on a daily basis where you wake up, like the uh you know the level of messed up shit that you could be like waking up to
yeah,
is otherworldly back home.
Hmm.
And I feel like that is kind of lost on my healthcare team over here.
Another example that I've heard of is when Syrian refugees came to Toronto. Many of them were frightened by uh, um, uh, the air show that happens during the exhibition during August,
Mhm.
mid-August, late August, because it reminded them of the fighter planes which would
Yeah.
drop bombs and stuff like that. So that
Yeah.
was kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah. I remember when I first came here, the snow plows when they come at night and
Mm,
they put the shovel on the ground, that's like a really loud sound.
yeah,
That had me like sweating awake at like 3 o'clock, and then they come at 3 o'clock in the morning. What the hell is up with that, man?
yeah, yeah. Very late night.
I guess there
So,
are, I guess there are no other cars on the street at that time.
oh,
I did want to jump into one other topic that I think is interesting around DID and Pakistan, which is um, identity in terms of trans and gender identity. There's a very different approaches back home in Pakistan as well as here in Canada. So can you talk about it from a bit of your expertise perspective on what's happening in Pakistan, what's happening over here, and what are the different aspects of that?
well, I'm not very familiar with the laws surrounding transgender
Yes.
uh, businesses in Pakistan, but like I have DID. That means I have parts that are not male or male identifying, right? This happens because and this like for example, like a lot of women will have male parts because of their sexual abuse in their childhood, because it's a sort of othering of the experience, if that makes sense. It is so intolerable that you have to be as far away from it as possible, right? That in itself, like this particular aspect of DID and transgenderism that comes together is spoken about a lot in the DID community. Like the sheer number of us that are transgender or non-straight is massive.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's very central to the trauma itself, right? And then the environment. So I personally feel like as a human being, we always think that we are inside of our body, but we're not just inside of our body. We are also what everybody thinks of us. We are also the environment that we make and the environment that influences us, right?
Hmm.
So these things are so they're so fine in our minds, like the place where sexuality and gender and these things actually rest in our brain, right? Is uh is very different for every single human being. And this is something that we've been able to like nail down with a lot of like recent research, is that the spectrum of sexual preferences and identities is something that is it is natural. It exists in other animals even,
Hmm.
right? There's there's a normal distribution of all of these manifestations of our mind uh that like happen all like throughout society. There's a portion of us in almost every community in the world. Um, and if you really think about it, it's probably the one thing that humanity has tried to beat out of itself
Yes.
the hardest, right? The amount of like stigma against like homosexual people, transgender people is on the level where like we still don't have laws protecting them in most countries, which is like like when you seriously think about it, like other marginalized groups are not afraid for their life of like going on a vacation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's if as long as you have a visa and a passport, you whoever you are, wherever you are, you'll at least be a visitor of some like respect, right? But there's countries where you can, but where like you absolutely cannot go, no matter what. And that, at least for us as Pakistanis and people who grew up Muslim, is pretty upsetting that we can't actually go to our holy places because those countries don't allow us to be ourselves.
Hmm.
Right? It's dangerous for us to go. A lot of LGBT people were having a hard time going to the World Cup because their respective countries were telling them that it's dangerous for you to go, right?
Yeah.
So
Right,
the
and Qatari officials said that they would confiscate any rainbow flags that they saw in the audience during
yeah,
the World Cup in the stadiums.
yeah. Now they can say we're not gonna arrest gay people, but that's pretty much a statement right there, right? Like it,
It,
bunch of
presupp
really
it presupposes that uh, there was definitely a fear that that gay people will get arrested if they had to make that statement, right? So it
yeah,
just tells you the situation and the context, and if it's a minister doing it, it's a high level enough, intense enough thing that the minister needs to get involved, right?
exactly.
So, what do you think about different countries' approaches? What do you think are some countries that are tackling healthcare and mental health in a better way than maybe some of the others that we touched on?
So, in my experience as a sufferer of DID, and I've spoken to, like I'm active in a lot of spaces where people with DID congregate. Some people who are even influential in those spheres. Um, what I'm gathering the most is that the European laws around
Hmm.
mental health are some of the most progressive compared to North American laws. Especially, like I personally feel like the U.S. is turning into Afghanistan, man. But like, I see,
Yeah,
because like things over there are going backwards, right? Like,
I
You know,
feel I find it striking how there's like they're like mirror images of each other, like in terms of how conservative they are. They're on extreme. You would think that they're on extreme opposite ends of the spectrum, but they're actually like almost exactly the same in their beliefs.
yeah, and we're in both Pakistan and over here, not here in Canada, but in the States, like they're having the exact same problems.
hmm.
With like fundamentalist like religion influences and like other such problems. They're
Extremism.
extremism, yeah, my bad. I don't remember the right words.
No, no, you're right, but I'm giving
But
another word for it, which
yeah,
I feel like covers many of these aspects.
yes, yes.
I feel that when you look at the US, it's 50 states. It's such a big place, and there have been multiple studies done that show that the culture might look homogeneous, but it's not homogeneous. Like
Right.
when you go to the East Coast states versus when you go to the center, it is there is value wise. There's quite a bit of difference, particularly between the urban centers and the rural center,
Mm.
Yeah.
of the US. So it's not a homogeneous kind of understanding. This I think is true about Canada as well, with to a large degree.
Mm. Even
And it's
more, I think, because Canada has Anglo versus Francophone communities.
yeah, exactly Anglo versus and the Métis and the Indian
Métis,
communities as well
indigenous.
have a very I will say they have had a it's a recent Canadian history that in the residential school system there's a high level of um, PTSD in one sense
Mm.
in the Canadian society because we're just the residential school system isn't like
It's not ancient
generational.
history.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's recent. So
It's yeah, people are living today who were suffering from that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this is a topic that I think we can talk about for a very long time,
True.
and something we will
do have
definitely have on back here in another podcast. But I wanted to actually ask you on what's next for you.
What's
What's
next for me?
Yeah, what are you doing in this space? What are some projects you're working on? How is it that our listeners or even us as individuals can help?
Well, I feel like with mental health, the thing is everybody can help, right? It takes something as simple as just looking around in your family, around your friends, and just being there for that person who may not be able to ask for help, right? The number of reasons why they're not able to ask for help is just i- immeasurable, right? And that's why, like, I wrote the post that I did on my Substack for the village, was that it's my responsibility. I'm a sufferer of mental health problems. It is even my responsibility to be there for other people like myself, because otherwise, this is a lonely experience. People don't even know they're struggling with it, right? The minor amount of research that a person can do to be able to help their loved ones can be life changing for their for the person who's actually suffering, because well, yeah, mental health is a sad and lonely experience. It's not a superpower, right? People living with it they're really suffering. Um, for me, in the future, I since I did all this therapy for years, and feel like I've become a lot better. And I already have a background in medicine. So what I would like to do in the immediate future is some advocacy and some get into some volunteering, go back to doing some research. Um,
And you're already publishing on your Substack where we can all subscribe, Elephant in the Mirror, right?
yes, Elephant in the Mirror is the name of my Substack. Um,
Awesome.
yeah.
We'll link to that in the show notes.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And I hope everyone who's listening has taken a moment to look at our YouTube or Twitter or on Spotify. But if you haven't, please do like, comment, subscribe, and look out for more topics and let us know what other things you'd like us to continue or to talk about. Because we have a growing community and a lot of interesting insights that are going to be coming up in the next few months. Thank you on again for taking your Saturday to speak with us and share your thoughts, because I think mental health is something that we need to continue to talk about. We have to keep educating individuals and communities that are coming to Canada and that need that help and support.
Yeah, and it's important because they can actually get it here. It's important to seek it. But thank you for having me.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, until next time.